Welcome to the ultimate showdown between superheroes and video game characters. Today we are going to dive into the history of Marvel vs. Capcom, a fighting game series that has been entertaining fans for over 2 decades. From the early days of X-Men vs. Street Fighter to the latest iteration, Marvel vs. Capcom is a series that has brought together some of the most iconic characters in pop culture. So get ready to unleash your inner hero as we explore the evolution of
Marvel vs. Capcom!
The first game in the Marvel vs. Capcom series was X-Men vs. Street Fighter, which was released in 1996. Developed by Capcom, the game was a crossover between Marvel's X-Men franchise and Capcom's Street Fighter series. The game was the brainchild of Capcom designer Akira Nishitani, who had previously worked on Street Fighter 2. Nishitani wanted to create a new fighting game that would incorporate Marvel characters and their unique powers. He also wanted to add new gameplay mechanics such as tag team battles and the ability to call and assist during fights. Nishitani's vision for the game would lay the foundation for what would become the Marvel vs. Capcom series. Capcom then released Marvel's Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. First released in arcades in 1997, the game would soon receive ports to the Sega Saturn in 1998 and the Sony PlayStation in 1999. The game replaced most of the X-Men cast from the previous installment and added a more diverse selection of characters. The game was also the first to introduce a new gameplay mechanic known as the Variable Assist. Variable Assist allowed players to summon their off-screen character to perform a special move without changing their currently controlled character. The game was well received by fans and overall praised for its sprite animation and its really awesome gameplay. Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes was the third game in the series to be released. The game first made its way to Japanese and North American arcades in 1998, but was soon ported to the Sega Dreamcast in 1999, then the Sony PlayStation in 2000. Unlike in previous entries, the game features characters from numerous Capcom video game franchises rather than strictly Street Fighter characters. While the gameplay is largely identical to its predecessor, Clash of Superheroes features 2 distinct changes. The game removed the use of traditional character assist systems, and instead would use the variable cross attack. Also known as duo team attack, when executing a variable cross, the player can attack their opponent with both characters simultaneously for a limited time. A compilation game was released in 2012 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 called Marvel vs. Capcom Origins. It was released as a downloadable title only through the PlayStation Network and Xbox Live Arcade. The compilation featured upgraded high-definition graphics as well as online multiplayer capabilities. The game went fairly unnoticed, but did receive praise for its overall polish. Released in arcades in 2000 and ported to the Dreamcast within that same year, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes is considered by many to be the best game in the series. It would see releases on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox 2 years later in 2002. The game featured a more simplistic control scheme, 3-on-3 combat, and a new character assist system. Also, the visuals were unique, using 2D character sprites while rendering the backgrounds in 3D. The game received positive reviews from critics who praised its gameplay, visuals, and character roster, while criticizing the soundtrack and initial lack of online multiplayer support outside of Japan. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Fate of Two Worlds was released for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2011. The game included various gameplay designs to make it more accessible to newer players, such as the comeback mechanic and an even more simplistic control scheme. The game transitioned from 2D character sprites to fully 3D character models, but keeping its 2D fighting style. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was a standalone updated version of the original Marvel vs. Capcom 3. This version would eventually see a release on the PlayStation Vita as a launch title. It would also see releases on the PS4 and Xbox One as a download-only title. It features new characters, stages, modes, and other enhancements to improve game balance and online functionality. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 includes an insane roster of 50 playable characters, bringing one of the most stacked lineups in any fighting game. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was a very popular game in the competitive fighting game scene during its time. It was one of the main games featured in many major fighting game tournaments, and was considered one of the big 3 games along with Street Fighter 4 and Super Smash Bros. Melee. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3's fast-paced gameplay and flashy over-the-top combos made it a favorite among both players and spectators. The game's complex mechanics also made it very technical and a challenging game to master, which appealed to competitive players looking for a game with a high ceiling. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was released in 2017 and is the 6th installment in the Marvel vs. Capcom series of fighting games. One of the biggest changes in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite compared to previous games in the series is the shift to a 2v2 gameplay system as opposed to a 3v3 system used in previous games. One of the unique features of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is the Infinity Stone system, which allows players to choose one of 6 different stones to give their team special abilities and power-ups during matches. The game received mixed reviews upon its release, with criticism aimed at its graphics, limited roster, and lack of certain fan-favorite characters. In 2018, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was removed from the lineup of the Evolution of Championship series, also known as EVO, one of the largest fighting game tournaments in the world, due to low entrant numbers and lack of community interest. Despite its mixed reception, the game has a dedicated fan base and is still played and enjoyed by many fighting game fans. From its humble beginnings to its current status as a beloved franchise, we've seen how the game has evolved over time to become the beloved fighting game that it is today. So, what's next for Marvel vs. Capcom? Only time will tell, but one thing is for sure, this franchise has a bright future ahead. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane. Until next time, keep fighting.